I never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet. My name's Michael, I'm 34, and I've been married to Jennifer for 8 years. We met in college, fell head over heels, and tied the knot soon after graduation. I'm an airline pilot, which means I'm away from home a lot. Jen's always been supportive of my career, or so I thought. Things were great for the first few years. We traveled, bought a house, and started talking about having kids. But lately, something's felt off. Jen's been distant, always on her phone, and making excuses not to spend time together when I'm home. I chalked it up to stress from her job as a marketing executive, but man, was I in for a rude awakening. Last week, I had a layover in Chicago. I wasn't supposed to be there, but a last-minute schedule change put me in the Windy City for 24 hours. I figured I'd surprise Jen with a video call, show her the skyline from my hotel room. When I called, she didn't pick up. No big deal, right? She's probably in a meeting. Then I get a text, can't talk, swamped at work. Love you. Something about it didn't sit right. Maybe it was pilot's intuition, but I decided to check our shared location app. And there it was, a punch to the gut. Jen wasn't at her office in Boston. The little blue showed her smack in the middle of downtown Chicago. My mind started racing. What the hell was she doing here? Why lie about being at work? I tried to rationalize it, maybe a surprise business trip she forgot to mention? But deep down I knew something was very, very wrong. I couldn't just sit in my hotel room stewing. I had to know what was going on. So I did something I'm not proud of. I used the app to track her location. It led me to a fancy restaurant in the Gold Coast area. Heart pounding, I took a cab there, telling myself I was overreacting. As I approached the restaurant, I saw her through the window. My Jen, laughing and sipping wine with some guy I'd never seen before. He was handsome, in a slick corporate way, expensive suit, perfect hair. Then it happened. He leaned in and kissed her, right there in broad daylight. And she kissed him back. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. My legs went weak, and I had to lean against a parking meter to keep from falling over. A passerby asked if I was okay, probably thinking I was having a heart attack. In a way I was. I wanted to storm in there, make a scene, demand answers. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching my wife betray me over appetizers and Chardonnay. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place. Eventually, I managed to drag myself back to my hotel room. I felt numb, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. I called in sick for my next flight. There was no way I could focus on flying a plane in this state. That night was hell. I tossed and turned, replaying that kiss in my mind over and over. I checked Jen's location obsessively. She spent the night at a hotel not far from the restaurant. I didn't need to be a genius to figure out what was happening there. The next morning, I got another cheery text from Jen. Hope you're having a good trip, babe. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. The casualness of it, the blatant lie, it made me want to scream. Or throw up. Or both. I spent the day in a daze, alternating between fury and despair. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, but the pilot in me said to stay calm, gather more information. So I decided to play it cool and see how deep this rabbit hole went. I flew home the next day, my mind a mess of questions and scenarios. When I walked through our front door, Jen greeted me with a hug and a kiss like nothing was wrong. The act made my skin crawl. "How was your trip, honey?" she asked, all smiles. I forced a grin. "Oh, same old. How about you? Busy at work?" She launched into a detailed story about a stressful project, meetings that ran late, a presentation she'd nailed. The lies flowed so easily from her lips, I almost doubted what I'd seen. Almost. "Sounds rough," I said, watching her face for any sign of guilt. There was none. "Hey, how about we go out for dinner tomorrow night? That new place in the city you've been wanting to try." Jen's smile faltered for a split second. "Oh, actually I have a late meeting tomorrow." "Raincheck?" And there it was. Another lie, another excuse. I nodded, pretending to be disappointed. "Sure, no problem. Maybe this weekend?" As I unpacked my bag, I couldn't help but wonder, how long had this been going on? And what the hell was I going to do about it? The next few days were a twisted game of cat and mouse. I pretended everything was normal while secretly watching Jen's every move. She was good, I'll give her that. If I hadn't seen her with my own eyes in Chicago, I might never have suspected a thing. But now that I knew what to look for, the signs were everywhere. The hushed phone conversations that stopped when I entered the room. The sudden work emergencies that called her away at odd hours. The new lingerie I glimpsed in her drawer but never saw her wear. I decided to dig deeper. While Jen was in the shower one morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. My hands shook as I typed in her passcode, my birthday of all things. What I found made me sick to my stomach. There were hundreds of messages between her and a contact named Jake, obviously a fake name. The texts were explicit, detailing their hookups and plans for future rendezvous. There were even a few dick pics from this Jake guy. But what hurt the most were the messages where they laughed about me, calling me clueless and boring. I was so engrossed in reading that I almost didn't hear the shower turn off. I quickly put the phone back and retreated to the kitchen, my mind reeling from what I'd discovered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, listening to Jen's steady breathing beside me, wondering how she could sleep so peacefully while living such a massive lie. I felt like I was suffocating in our own bed. The next morning, Jen announced she had to go on a sudden business trip to New York for a few days. I knew it was bullshit, but I just nodded and wished her a safe flight. As soon as she left, I sprang into action. I called in some favors with my pilot buddies and got access to the passenger manifests for flights to New York. Surprise, surprise, Jen wasn't on any of them. I then checked her credit card statements online. There was a hotel booking, all right, but it was for a fancy resort in the Bahamas. For two. My blood boiling, I decided to do something drastic. I booked myself on the next flight to Nassau. If Jen wanted a surprise, I'd give her one she'd never forget. The flight was torturous. Every minute felt like an hour as scenarios played out in my head. What would I say? What would I do? Part of me hoped it was all a big misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew better. As the plane touched down in Nassau, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jen, "Missing you, babe. New York is so lonely without you." The blatant lie was the final straw. It was time to blow this whole thing wide open. I took a taxi straight to the resort, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The tropical paradise around me felt like a cruel joke. Here I was, in one of the most beautiful places on earth, about to confront the ugly truth of my marriage. At the reception desk, I put on my best, confused husband act. "Hi, I'm here to surprise my wife, Jennifer. She checked in yesterday. Could you tell me which room she's in?" The receptionist smiled. "Of course, sir. Let me just check. Yes. Mrs. Thompson is in the Ocean View Suite, room 412. Thompson." She'd used my last name. Somehow, that made it even worse. I rode the elevator up, my legs feeling like lead. As I approached room 412, I heard laughter from inside. Jen's laugh, the one I used to love, now twisted into something painful. For a moment, I hesitated. Did I really want to see what was behind that door? But I'd come too far to back down now. I took a deep breath and knocked. The laughter stopped abruptly. There was a muffled conversation, then footsteps. The door opened, and there she was, my wife, wrapped in a bathrobe, her face a mask of shock and horror. "Michael?" she stammered. What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, a man's voice called from inside the room. "Babe, who is it?" And that's when all hell broke loose. The next few moments were a blur of shouting, cursing, and chaos. I pushed past Jen into the room, where I found her lover, the same slick-looking guy from Chicago, scrambling to put on his pants. "Who the fuck are you?" he demanded, trying to sound tough but clearly caught off guard. "I'm her husband, asshole," I spat back. "The one you two have been laughing about behind my back?" Jen was in tears now, babbling excuses and apologies. "Michael, please, it's not what it looks like." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Not what it looks like. Are you serious, Jen? You're in the Bahamas with your boyfriend while you told me you were in New York for work. How stupid do you think I am?" The guy, Jake, I assumed, had the audacity to try and calm the situation. "Look, man, Let's all just take a deep breath here, Dash. I cut him off. You shut the fuck up. I'm not here to talk to you. I turned back to Jen. How long has this been going on? And don't you dare lie to me again. Jen's face crumpled. 6 months, she whispered. But Michael, you have to understand, Dash. Understand what? I roared. That while I've been working my ass off, flying all over the country to support us, you've been screwing this douchebag in every city with an airport? The truth was out now, but somehow, I didn't feel any better. In fact, I felt worse than ever. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the revelation hanging heavy in the air. Then Jen's lover, Jake, decided to open his mouth again. Listen, pilot boy, he sneered, apparently finding his courage. Maybe if you weren't always jetting off, leaving your wife alone, she wouldn't have needed to find comfort elsewhere. Something in me snapped. Before I knew what was happening, my fist connected with Jake's jaw. He stumbled back, knocking over a lamp and crashing into the minibar. Michael, stop. Jen screamed, grabbing my arm. This isn't you. I shook her off, my voice low and dangerous. You don't know who I am anymore, Jen. Just like I clearly never knew you. Jake was back on his feet, wiping blood from his lip. You're gonna regret that, asshole. I'll sue you for assault. I laughed humorlessly. Go ahead. I'm sure the judge will love to hear how you were just innocently fucking a married woman when her mean old husband showed up. Jen was sobbing now, mascara streaking down her face. Please, Michael, can we just talk about this? I know I messed up, but I love you. We can fix this. Her words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Fix this? The audacity of it all suddenly made me feel very, very tired. There's nothing to fix, Jen, I said quietly. It's over. I want a divorce. The finality of those words seemed to echo in the suddenly silent room. I turned and walked out, leaving my cheating wife and her lover standing amidst the wreckage of what used to be my life. I stumbled out of the resort in a daze, the bright Bahamian sun a stark contrast to the darkness I felt inside. I found myself on the beach, collapsed onto the sand, and let out a primal scream that had been building up since Chicago. A few nearby tourists looked alarmed, but I couldn't bring myself to care. As the initial shock wore off, the reality of what just happened began to sink in. My marriage was over. 8 years, gone in an instant. And for what? Some sleazy affair with a guy who probably had a different woman in every city. My phone started buzzing incessantly, calls and texts from Jen. I turned it off without reading any of them. What could she possibly say to make this better? I sat there for hours, watching the waves crash on the shore, trying to make sense of my new reality. As the sun began to set, I realized I had nowhere to go. I couldn't stomach the thought of going back to that resort, but I also couldn't just hop on a plane back home. Did I even have one anymore? Just as I was contemplating sleeping on the beach, a voice behind me made me jump. Rough day, brother? I turned to see an older man, probably in his 60s, holding out a beer to me. He had the weathered look of someone who'd seen his fair share of life's ups and downs. You have no idea, I replied, accepting the beer gratefully. The old man, who introduced himself as Frank, sat down next to me. Try me, he said with a knowing smile. And so, as the stars came out over the Caribbean, I found myself pouring my heart out to a complete stranger on a Bahamian beach. Frank listened patiently as I spilled my guts, nodding occasionally and passing me another beer when needed. When I finally finished my story, he let out a low whistle. That's one hell of a situation you're in, son, he said, his voice gravelly from years of smoking. Reminds me of my second wife. Caught her with the pool boy. Cliché, I know, but there you have it. I couldn't help but chuckle at that. So what did you do? Frank's eyes twinkled mischievously. Well, first I fired the pool boy. Then I drained the pool and filled it with concrete. Petty? Sure. Satisfying? Absolutely. We shared a laugh, and for a moment, I felt a little lighter. But reality soon came crashing back. I don't even know where to go from here, I admitted. I can't go back to that resort, but I don't want to go home either. Everything there will remind me of her. Frank nodded thoughtfully. I've got a little beach shack not far from here. It ain't much, but you're welcome to crash there for a few days while you figure things out. I was taken aback by his kindness. That's incredibly generous. But why would you do that for a stranger? He shrugged. Let's just say I've been where you are, and I wish I'd had someone to help me through it. Sometimes, the universe puts the right person in your path when you need them most. As we walked to Frank's shack, my phone buzzed again. I turned it back on, half out of habit, half out of morbid curiosity. It was another text from Jen. Please come back. We need to talk. I can explain everything. I showed it to Frank, who snorted. Explain everything? Brother, unless she's about to reveal she's a secret agent and this was all part of some elaborate mission, there's nothing to explain. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I might actually get through this. The next few days at Frank's beach shack were a blur of introspection, anger, and surprisingly deep conversations with my newfound friend. Frank, it turned out, had a wealth of life experience and a knack for cutting through bullshit. On the third day, as we sat on his rickety porch watching the sunset, Frank turned to me with a serious look. You know you're gonna have to face the music eventually, right? Can't hide out in paradise forever. I sighed, knowing he was right. I know. I'm not sure I'm ready to deal with all the fallout. Frank chuckled. Son, you'll never be ready. Life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It's messy and it hurts and it knocks you on your ass. But you've got to get back up and face it head on. Just then my phone pinged. I'd been ignoring most messages, but this one caught my eye. It was from my co-pilot, Jake, not to be confused with the asshole Jake back at the resort. Dude, where are you? The airline's going nuts. You've missed 2 flights. Everything okay? Shit. In all the chaos, I'd completely forgotten about work. Reality was crashing back in, whether I liked it or not. I've got to go back, I said, more to myself than to Frank. He nodded approvingly. Damn right you do. But remember, going back doesn't mean going backwards. You're not the same man who flew down here, Michael. You're stronger now. As I packed my meager belongings and prepared to head to the airport, Frank handed me a piece of paper with his number on it. If you ever need to talk or just want to escape to the beach for a while, you give me a call, you hear? I thanked him, feeling a lump in my throat. Then, squaring my shoulders, I set off to face whatever awaited me back home. The flight back to Boston was a surreal experience. As a passenger, I found myself hyper-aware of every little detail, wondering if the pilots up front were dealing with personal crises of their own. By the time we landed, I had steeled myself for what was to come. I took a cab straight to the airline's office, knowing I had some explaining to do. My boss, Captain Harris, was waiting for me, his face a mix of concern and disappointment. Thompson, what the hell happened? You've never missed a flight in your life, and suddenly you drop off the grid for days. I took a deep breath. Sir, I'm sorry. I had a personal emergency. My wife. I caught her cheating. I didn't handle it well. Harris's expression softened slightly. Jesus Smith. I'm sorry to hear that. But you know you can't just disappear like that. We were about to file a missing persons report. I know, sir. It won't happen again. I'm ready to get back to work. He studied me for a moment. Are you sure about that? Maybe you should take some time off, sort things out. The thought of sitting at home, alone with my thoughts, was unbearable. With all due respect, sir, I need to work. Flying is the only thing that makes sense to me right now. Harris nodded slowly. All right, but you're on probation. One slip-up and you're grounded. Understood. I agreed, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. As I left the office, I checked my phone. There were dozens of missed calls and messages from Jen. I deleted them all without reading them. Then I saw a text from an unknown number. This is Jake. We need to talk. Meet me at the Liberty Hotel bar tonight at 8. Come alone. My blood boiled. What could that homewrecker possibly have to say to me? Against my better judgment, I found myself typing a response. I'll be there. But this better be good. The Liberty Hotel bar was buzzing with after-work crowds when I arrived. I spotted Jake immediately, sitting alone at the bar, nursing what looked like a whiskey. My fists clenched involuntarily as I approached him. Make this quick, I growled, sliding onto the stool next to him. Jake looked up, his face a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Look, Michael, I know you probably want to punch me again, and I wouldn't blame you. But there's something you need to know." I ordered a double scotch, needing something strong to get through this conversation. "What could you possibly have to say that I'd want to hear?" Jake took a deep breath. "It's about Jen. She's not who you think she is. Neither am I, for that matter." My confusion must have shown on my face because Jake continued, lowering his voice. "We work for a private intelligence firm. The affair, it wasn't real. It was part of an operation." I nearly choked on my drink. "What the fuck are you talking about?" "I know how it sounds," Jake said, glancing around nervously. "But it's the truth. Jen was recruited years ago, before she met you. Her job was to get close to you because of your position as a pilot. They wanted inside information on flight patterns, security protocols, that sort of thing." My mind was reeling. This couldn't be real. It had to be some sort of sick joke. "So you're telling me my entire marriage was a lie? That Jen never loved me?" Jake looked uncomfortable. "That's the thing. Jen wasn't supposed to fall in love with you, but she did. That's why she wanted out. The affair with me was supposed to be her exit strategy. Push you away, and the marriage, complete the mission. But she couldn't go through with it." I sat there, stunned. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more twisted, it had taken a turn into espionage territory. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, while another part wanted to scream. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally managed to ask. Jake's expression turned grim. "Because Jen's in trouble. Big trouble. And you might be the only one who can help her." I stared at Jake, my mind struggling to process this bombshell. "In trouble? What kind of trouble?" Jake leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "When Jen tried to back out of the operation, our handlers weren't happy. They're not the kind of people you say no to. She's been taken to a safe house for reprogramming. That's code for breaking her will and ensuring her compliance." My head was spinning. Part of me still couldn't believe this wasn't some elaborate hoax. But the gravity in Jake's eyes told me he wasn't lying. "Why should I believe you?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "For all I know, this is just another manipulation." Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small USB drive. "Everything you need to know is on here. Flight logs, mission briefings, surveillance photos. It'll prove what I'm saying." I took the drive, my hand trembling slightly. "If this is true, why are you helping her now?" Jake's face softened. "Because I fell for her too. For real. The affair might have started as part of the mission, but somewhere along the line, it became genuine. At least for me. And I can't stand the thought of what they might be doing to her." A surge of jealousy and anger rushed through me, followed quickly by confusion and fear. If what Jake was saying was true, the woman I loved was in serious danger. But could I trust him? "What do you expect me to do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Jake's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Help me rescue her. You know her better than anyone. With your skills as a pilot and my inside knowledge, we might have a chance." I sat there, my scotch forgotten, faced with a decision that would change my life forever. Do I walk away from the woman who lied to me for years? Or do I risk everything to save her? "I need time to think," I said finally, pocketing the USB drive. "And to verify your story." Jake nodded, sliding a burner phone across the bar. 24 hours. That's all the time we have. If you're in, call the only number on that phone. If not, destroy the drive and forget this conversation ever happened." With that, he stood up and walked out, leaving me alone with an impossible choice. I spent the next few hours in a daze, my mind reeling from the implications of Jake's revelation. I found myself in a 24-hour internet cafe, paranoid about using my home computer. With shaking hands, I plugged in the USB drive. What I saw shook me to my core. There were surveillance photos of Jen and me from years ago, long before we were married. Mission reports detailing our relationship milestones, all clinically documented as part of an operation. Most chilling were the recent files, plans for Jen's extraction and reprogramming. It was all true. My entire life had been a carefully orchestrated lie. I stumbled out of the cafe at dawn, my world completely upended. I found myself walking aimlessly through the city, grappling with the truth. Anger, betrayal, fear, and confusion warred within me. But beneath it all, a realization was forming. Despite everything, I still loved Jen. And she was in danger. As the 24-hour deadline approached, I found myself in Logan Airport, staring at the departures board. A crazy, reckless plan was forming in my mind. I picked up the burner phone Jake had given me and dialed the only number. "I'm in," I said when Jake answered. "But we're doing this my way." "What's your plan?" Jake asked, a mix of relief and apprehension in his voice. "You said she's in a safe house, right?" "Where?" "A remote location in upstate New York," Jake replied. I took a deep breath. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to commandeer a small plane. You're going to give me the exact coordinates. We're flying in, getting Jen, and getting out. Fast." There was a pause on the other end. "That's insane," Jake finally said. "It might just work." As I hung up, I caught sight of my reflection in a window. The man staring back at me looked nothing like the trusting, naive pilot from a week ago. He looked determined, dangerous even. "Hold on, Jen," I muttered. "I'm coming for you." With that, I strode towards the private aviation area, my pilot's credentials in hand. It was time to save my wife, and maybe find out who she really was in the process. The next few hours were a blur of adrenaline and calculated risks. Using my credentials and a hastily concocted story about an emergency medical flight, I managed to get access to a small Cessna. As I went through the pre-flight checks, my hands steady despite the gravity of what I was about to do, I couldn't help but marvel at how quickly my life had spiraled into something out of a spy thriller. Jake met me at a small airfield just outside the city. He looked nervous but determined as he climbed into the co-pilot seat. "You sure you can do this?" he asked as I taxied towards the runway. I shot him a hard look. "I've been flying since before you were out of diapers. Just give me the coordinates and stay out of my way." As we took off, the familiar sensation of leaving the ground behind calmed my nerves somewhat. This, at least, I knew how to do. The rest, well, I was making it up as I went along. We flew in tense silence for most of the journey, the gravity of our mission hanging heavy in the air. As we neared the coordinates Jake had provided, I began to descend, looking for a place to land. "There," Jake pointed suddenly. "That clearing about a half-mile from the compound. It's our best shot." I nodded, focusing on bringing us down safely in the small space. As the wheels touched down, bumping along the uneven ground, reality came crashing back. We were really doing this. "Okay," I said, turning to Jake as I cut the engine. "What's the plan once we're inside?" Jake pulled out a small tablet, showing me a rough layout of the compound. "Security will be tight, but I know their protocols. If we time it right, we can slip in during a shift change. Jen's likely being held in the East Wing. We get in, get her, and get out. Simple." I snorted. "Simple, right?" I checked my watch. "We've got about 20 minutes before someone comes looking for this plane. Let's move." As we crept towards the compound, a fortified structure that looked more like a prison than a safe house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. But there was no turning back now. Jen needed me, and despite everything, I wasn't about to let her down. Our infiltration of the compound was a heart-pounding mix of stealth and sheer luck. Jake's inside knowledge proved invaluable as we navigated the facility's security measures. We managed to slip past guards and disable cameras, making our way to the East Wing where Jen was supposedly being held. As we approached the final door, I heard a familiar voice, Jen's voice, raised in anger. "I told you I'm done. I won't do this anymore." My heart raced as Jake worked on the electronic lock. The moment it clicked open, I burst into the room, ready for anything. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. Jen wasn't restrained or being tortured as I'd feared. She was standing defiantly in front of a group of stern-looking individuals in suits. When she saw me, her eyes widened in shock. "Michael? What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the compound. One of the suited individuals reached for a weapon, but Jake was faster, disarming him with a swift move. "We don't have time for explanations," I shouted over the noise. "We need to go. Now." In the chaos that followed, Jen hesitated for only a moment before running to my side. As we fought our way back through the compound, alarms blaring and guards in pursuit, I caught glimpses of the woman I thought I knew. Her movements were precise, almost predatory. This was a side of Jen I'd never seen before. We barely made it to the plane, bullets whizzing past us as I frantically started the engine. As we took off, climbing steeply to escape the gunfire, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Jen spoke first, her voice a mix of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. "Michael, I can explain everything." I kept my eyes on the horizon, my voice steadier than I felt. "Oh, you're going to explain all right. But not now. Right now, we need to figure out where we're going because we sure as hell can't go home." As the compound faded into the distance behind us, I realized that this was far from over. We were fugitives now, running from a shadowy organization with unknown reach. But for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The following weeks were a whirlwind of revelations, arguments, and reconciliations. Jen told me everything about her recruitment, the mission, and how she'd fallen in love with me for real, compromising her entire operation. Jake filled in the gaps, providing evidence that cleared Jen of the worst accusations. We spent time in hiding, moving from place to place, always looking over our shoulders. It was during these intense moments, ironically, that Jen and I truly got to know each other for the first time. The lies were gone, replaced by raw, honest conversations that were painful but necessary. I learned that the woman I'd married was both more and less than I'd thought. More complex, more capable, but also more vulnerable and human than the perfect wife I'd believed in. And despite everything, I found myself falling in love with her all over again, this time, with eyes wide open. It took months of legal battles, whistleblowing, and narrowly avoiding assassination attempts, but we eventually managed to expose the corrupt elements of the organization Jen had worked for. The aftermath was messy, but we were finally free. Now, as I sit here writing this, I can hardly believe the journey we've been through. Jen and I are working on rebuilding our life together, this time on a foundation of truth. It's not easy. Trust is a fragile thing, easily broken and slowly rebuilt. But we're committed to making it work. To anyone reading this who might be going through their own relationship crisis, my advice is this: the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a comfortable lie. And sometimes, the person you thought you knew might surprise you, for better or for worse. Love is complicated, messy, and sometimes it comes with a side of international espionage. But if it's real, it's worth fighting for. Just maybe not literally fighting armed guards and stealing planes. Leave that to the professionals. Or, the desperate husbands of secret agents. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for watching my videos, sharing them, and supporting me along the way. Your views, comments, and likes are the driving force behind my passion to create captivating and unexpected stories. Every tale I share is more than just a plot. It's a journey of emotions, lessons, and reflections that we experience together. Your engagement brings life and soul to this channel. Thank you for sticking with me until the very end of each video because the finale of every story is where the real impact lies. I promise to continue delivering twists and turns that surprise, inspire, and resonate with your hearts.